I worked at a very nice nursing home for a while as a med tech RCNA while I was in school. I worked on the memory care unit, genuinely well cared for, happy residents, clean facilities, the whole 9 yards. One of the residents, Mr. B, had been there since opening day, and he was very particular and liked things his way. He had his seat in the dining room. He got exactly 3 scoops of strawberry ice cream after dinner. He sat in his chair by his window until exactly 11:30. Just a grumpy little cutie pie. Well, he inevitably died, and a new resident had moved in less than a week later with her own things, but her bed and armchair were in the same place as Mr. B's. Her first night I had done around and was doing whatever dumb shit I did at night after residents were in bed, washing compression hose or something. And the new resident comes down the hall and said, "There's a man in my room telling me to get out." We had a man who would sometimes wander, so I assumed it was him and went with her to her room to take him back to bed. Her room was empty. Assuming it was still him, I tucked her back in and went to find him. No one was up, and the wanderer was asleep in bed. Oh well, maybe she dreamed it. I went back to the desk and she came up again maybe 20 minutes later saying, "He said to get out, that I'm in his room." I walked her back again. Nothing. She points to her armchair and is like, "He said to move my chair and put his back and to get out of his room," at which point my brain put 2 and 2 together. I ended up letting her sit in the nurse's station with me until third shift showed up. The third shift CNA got there and started complaining about the new resident being up. I explained what happened and she rolled her eyes and said, "Come on," and stormed off down the hallway muttering about my incompetence under her breath. She marched into the new resident's room and said, "Mr. B, you are dead. This is not your room anymore. Go on and let this poor woman sleep." The resident went to bed. I went home, and after that night, there were no more complaints of nighttime visitors from that resident. I felt kind of bad, but I didn't know how to exorcise ghosts. They didn't cover that in the medtech class. It was my second night with this PT in his late 80s. He was terminally ill and was leaving for home hospice. In the middle of the night, I go to do vitals, and he's talking out loud in his sleep and fidgeting. Hadn't done it the night before. I wake him up and ask what he was dreaming. Tells me he was dreaming about being with his friends when he was younger, such as going to the bar and partying. Said it was some of his favorite times in his life. I thought that must have a great dream and left when I finished care. A couple hours later, I had left with a coworker to pick up a PT. When I returned, all of my coworkers are freaking out, even our senior nurses. My PT was on portable video because he could be forgetful at times. On the camera, they had witnessed multiple orbs shooting through the room that had looked similar to shooting stars. We get that from time to time, but they said that there were a crazy amount to where the room looked like it was glowing. Some co-workers even went in to check. When they did, the video person said they'd disappear, then return when staff left. By the time I returned, the orbs had just stopped. About 15-30 minutes later, my PT wakes up and decides to get up from the bed. I go in there and thought it was weird for him because he didn't really do that the night prior. I ask him where he's going. He points to an area behind me and says that his friends are here and want to play cards with him. My coworker who was with me paled. I just said that they should play cards when it was a little later and tucked him into bed. I thought that this whole situation was pretty wholesome. My coworkers thought I was nuts, haha. I was like his friends just wanted to stop by and say hi. I was rotating in a rural country hospital. I was on nights with a rural family emergency physician, so we basically took care of the entire hospital at night while we were on shift. We would typically get around 1 PT an hour, so on a dead night the nurses would tell me to just go sleep in a PT bed on the top floor of the hospital. The hospital top level wasn't being used, so employees would sometimes sleep there if they were working nights. I find a room, and it is overlooking the small city park. The snow is coming down, and the halogen lights are the only thing cutting through the thick, snow-covered darkness. I go to sleep, and then I wake up about an hour later, super cold. The old-school heater was next to the window, so I got up to turn it back on. Click, click, click. I hear as I turn the dial to heat, only I didn't turn it a third time. The third click was a soft click on the glass window. I look out of the window and see a figure in the snow standing in the park, under the orange glow of the halogen lights, looking at the hospital. No, they were looking at me. Chills instantly went through me, and I drew away from the window. I looked back out the window, and there was no more dark figure to be seen. I looked for a trail of footprints, but in that moment the winter storm really picked up and I could no longer see out the window. I went back and sat on the bed with my back facing the door, just staring out the window, trying to process what I just thought I saw. Then there was a knock on the door. I spun around only to see the ED nurse poke her head in through the door to let me know we had a patient in the ED I needed to see. I never saw the dark figure again, and I hope I never do. I work in a hospital that is a semi-new building, maybe 30 years old, but it was built on the site of a previous building which had housed the psych hospital for decades prior. There were some successful suicides in the old building many years ago, and a few medical deaths in our building over the years. My coworkers swear it's haunted. I was working charge one night a few months back, and my coworker called from the pediatric unit in the basement, freaking out, asked me to come down and look at something. Security showed up too and seemed a bit freaked out himself, which I found weird. BC, he's not an easily rattled guy. Went down and they showed me a patient room that was closed for construction, door locked. It had been locked all night and staff had been in and out of the hallway constantly all night. Nobody had unlocked it. Then I was shown a single frame from the security footage. Couldn't see the whole thing for security reasons. In the footage you can clearly see the door is open and the head and shoulders of a young black boy with short hair lying on the floor in the open doorway. According to security, the image was visible for a few minutes on the security footage. Obviously, this could have been a prank. I only saw one screenshot, but my coworkers were pretty riled up about it. I don't believe in ghosts, but if their story is true, I don't have an explanation. Omi, other thing. Apparently, one of the patients who had recently stayed in that room before it was closed for repair was a young man who tragically committed suicide not too long after discharge.